We're telling stories here we're going to tell stories of the famous Rabbi Moishe Moninson. His name was Menachem Manish. And he was a famous chassid, very wealthy chassid, born into wealth. And we'll soon tell some stories in the subsequent days, Be'ez Hashem, with him, and particularly the Rebbe Rashab, who funded, a great philanthropist, was involved in all of the Rebbe Rashab's work. But first, the story with his father, the Reb Shloimeh. It's a famous story. You may have heard a little bit. We'll tell you the story. And the story is as follows. Reb Shloimeh Moninson was a chassid of the Mittel Rebbe. He too was a Gvir ben Gvir. This is a wealthy family going back generations. And his early chinuch he received from the Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. So just to bring you up to speed, we're telling a story of Reb Shloimeh Moninson. So he was born into wealth. He was born into wealth, and his early education was from the Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. That's how far back we're going. Now here's what the Rebbe Rashab said about this Reb Shloimeh, the Fabrengen once, famous Simchas Torah Fabrengen of Tafresh Samach Aleph, 1901. See how he describes him. Listen carefully. It says very, very subtle, very deep. You'll hear the story. So this Reb Shloimeh was a fine chassid. And after Yechidus, we're talking about the Yechidus that he would have with the Mittel Rebbe, that's the Alter Rebbe's son. He used to fabreng with the Chassidim, like all Chassidim would do, used to be that way. And there used to be the custom after the Chassidim after Yechidus was what's called the Yechidus Tanz. The Chassidim would dance, and as the other one came out, he would join the Rikud. And as people came out of Yechidus, the Rikud grew, the great simcha and joy, the privilege of having been by the Rebbe and gotten guidance in Avodas Hashem and so on. So he did all these things, says the Rebbe Rashab, this is the previous Rebbe's father, describing Reb Shloimeh. But when it came to true inner Chassidic warmth, he was considered a little bit cool. In the words of Chassidim, he was a balabatish chassid. He was a balabatish. In the Chassidic world, is not necessarily the greatest compliment. It means balabatish, a man of the world. At the same time, he used to daven with a great islahavas. He davened with a great passion, and he attended all the fabrengens. I mean, externally, he was one of the boys, but there was something missing. Now, his life changed. This is Reb Shloimeh, the father of Reb Moishe, which will continue the stories next week. So he was attending a fabrengen of Chassidim, and by the fabrengen, so there was a chassid, Reb Michal. Reb Michal was a simple melamed. In fact, it says he limped. He limped. He was a simple fella. And the fabrengen, Reb Michal is crying. And he's striking, he was a simple fellow, and he's striking his heart and pounding his head. And he says, Rabbeinu Shalom, have rachmanas on me, and help me, crying bitterly, that I should have, when I say the words, illuminate our eyes in your Torah, before the Shema. May our heart be attached to your mitzvahs. And direct or unite our heart to love and fear you. Striking his head, not help me. I should say it with the same sincerity and with the same chayas. V'oisher means like that's what I really want. That Shloimeh Moninson and says the words v'oisher v'koved milfanecha. That wealth and glory is yours, is before you. He understands wealth and glory. When he says those words, he says it with all of his chayas. Help me, he said, that when I ask you, I should be a chassid that serve you sincerely. I should say it with the same depth and with the same appreciation. Now, the Rebbe Rashab continues and says like this. This Michal didn't in any way mean to be critical of Rabbi Shlomo. He said he was just pouring his heart out with true rachmanas on himself. But the words affected Rabbi Shlomo very deeply. This was in their town where they lived, in Shklov. He picked up and ran to Lubavitch. I must go into Yechidus, and he became another person after that Farbrengen with Rabbi Michal. And the Rabbi Shab continued and said that all the years previous to this story, that Farbrengen, that Rabbi Shlomo had gone to the Mittel Rebbe and being in Yechidus did not affect him, like the sincere words of this Rabbi Michal at the Farbrengen that really opened up, made him realize Gewalt, Gewalt. And that, in the words of Rebbe Rashab, the warmth and the emes, the truth, the emes of the deep pain that Rabbi Michal had, of his lack of true Oishe and Chayes, which means that that this is what I really, truly, and deeply desired. When I help me that I should really want this, like the Shlomo has in his request, that wealth and glory is before you, and include me too. So this affected him and shattered him externally, that now all the yechidus that he had in the previous years now are able to enter, and his true growth of a chassid began. So that's the story, and that is the introduction to really the stories will continue next week of his son, Reb Monye or Reb Menachem Monis, and some incredible stories with him and the Rebbe Rashab over the years. A very celebrated chassid involved in the philanthropic work of the Rebbe Rashab on a level that we'll hear, God willing, in the week to come. Okay.